I never imagined I'd reunite with my mother after 30 years and change my life forever. The day my world unraveled started with a strange phone call. It pierced through my mundane routine, a glimmer of hope wrapped in the dark coil of dread. My heart raced as a familiar, yet foreign voice whispered my name, a name I hadn't heard spoken with love since I was a child. "I'm coming for you," the words hung in the air, eerie and electric. My fingers trembled as I clutched the phone, memories crashing in like waves. An old photograph surfaced in my mind. Me, small and scared, holding a tattered bear, longing for a mother's embrace that never came. The silence in my apartment swallowed me whole, amplifying the heartbeat that thudded in my chest. I'd spent a lifetime piecing together the fragments of my childhood. Dad had tried, in his own way, but he was just one man. I often wondered where she was, what she was doing, if she missed me. The curiosity gnawed at my insides, but I'd learned to bury it deep. Now, I stood on the precipice of a storm, and the sky above cracked open with a thunderous promise. Days blurred as I prepared to confront a specter from my past. I could feel the tension in the air, taste the metallic dread swirling in my mouth. Friends worried for me, their faces mirrors of concern, a cocktail of fear and disbelief. "Are you sure you want to do this?" they asked, their voices trembling with uncertainty. They couldn't fathom my desire, my need to know. I felt alive with anticipation, yet terrified of what lay ahead. And then the day arrived. The sun hung low, casting a golden haze over the park where we agreed to meet. Every step felt like a countdown, each breath constricted by a blend of hope and fear. My palms dripped sweat as I scanned the faces around me. I thought I would recognize her, the scent of chamomile and the warmth of her smile. Yet, I didn't see her. Time seemed to stretch, the moment suspended in a breathless void. I closed my eyes, focusing on the pulse of the world around me. The distant laughter of children, the rustling leaves, the dread that settled like a physical weight upon my chest. Then it happened. I heard a voice behind me, soft yet impossible to ignore. "Are you waiting for someone?" I turned. She stood there, shadows dancing across her features, her eyes a stormy lake reflecting emotions I couldn't name. My heart lurched. This was it. The breath caught in my throat. Who was this woman? Did she know me? Did she even recognize the girl she'd left behind? Before I could speak, she smelled a hint of something warm and frightening, as if she held the universe's secrets behind those eyes. My heart raced, a furious drum echoing the chaos inside me. "I found you," she said, and darkness fell around us. The world tilted. I felt the eyes of strangers upon me, their whispers curling into my ears. "Isn't that the girl whose mother abandoned her?" Their judgment cut deeper than any blade. I swallowed hard. Did I dare take a step toward her? What if the reunion was a mistake? What if she was another lie wrapped in a facade of love? My body shook with the weight of uncertainty, an avalanche poised to bury my fragile hope. But I was here, at this precipice, teetering on the edge of a truth too big to swallow. The sun dipped lower, casting long shadows, and I stood there, gripping the arms of the past. Would I reach out? Would I find the strength to embrace what was coming? Or would I lose myself in the echoes of a long-buried mystery that now loomed before me with the force of a hurricane? Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button, it really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. The silence that followed felt oppressive, wrapping around us like a thick fog. I could see her lips moving, but the words floated just out of reach, trapped behind the wall of my disbelief. How had she found me? What were her intentions? I felt as if I had been swept up into a tempest, every question crashing like waves against the shore of my heart. You're really here," I managed to whisper, the weight of 3 decades of questions condensed into this single, fragile phrase. Her smile faltered slightly at my hesitation, but an undeterred light flickered in her eyes. "I've thought about you every single day," she said, her voice quivering as if grazing the edges of vulnerability. When I left, a part of me died. I never wanted to abandon you. I wanted to believe her, but the echoes of abandonment reverberated painfully in my soul. I took a step back instinctively, creating distance, fortress walls rearing their heads as my heart fought against the yearning to bridge this chasm that had separated us for so long. Why now? I asked, bitterness filtering through my voice, even as I fought against it. Why did you wait until now to find me? Her gaze fell, the storm clouds in her eyes breaking into patterns I couldn't decipher. I was lost, she admitted quietly, her fingers trembling at her side. I made mistakes, terrible mistakes. I've spent years regretting my decisions, struggling to find the right moment to tell you. To explain, the ache in my chest grew heavier, transforming into a tumult of despair and pity. This was not just a reunion. It was an unveiling of a pain I had long buried alongside my childhood memories, and now those memories clawed their way back, demanding to be heard. Just then, a child ran by, laughter bubbling in the air like the sweetest melody. It was a stark contrast to the gravity of our conversation. I turned to watch the child's innocence, a reminder of everything I had lost and everything I wished to shield from this moment's heavy reality. Let's find somewhere private to talk, she urged softly, but the words felt like a misplaced comfort. What could she possibly say in a secluded corner away from prying eyes that would lift the burden from my heart? I hesitated but nodded, not trusting my voice to speak. As we walked, I could feel the anticipation of the people around us like static in the air. The sun was setting now, and with it, the warmth began to wane, leaving a chill that sank deep into my bones. That we stopped at a bench under a sprawling oak tree, its roots twisting like memories yearning to break free from the earth. I sat down, feeling dwarfed by the enormity of the moment. My mother, the woman I had spent years dreaming of meeting, sat beside me, her presence both comforting and terrifying. "That I want to start over," she said, her voice raw and trembling. "I know I can't change the past, but am here now, willing to do whatever it takes to make this right." The air thickened with the weight of her admission. Her words felt laced with sincerity, yet suspicion lingered, gnawing at my mind. "What if I don't want to start over?" I asked, testing the waters, voicing the thoughts I had buried for so long. "What if I'm not ready to forgive?" She closed her eyes for a moment, swallowing hard. "I understand that it's a lot to ask. I'm just asking for the chance to explain who I am now." And just then, as her confession hung in the air like a fragile spider's web, the sudden sound of a commotion erupted nearby, shattering our fragile moment. A group of teenagers erupted into the park, and in the midst of their laughter and shouts, a familiar face emerged. Dan, my best friend since childhood, the one person who had seen me at my lowest moments. His eyes widened in shock as they locked onto mine, confusion etched in every crease of his brow. But it wasn't just the surprise reflected in his expression. There was fear too, and something dark-hairy realization that pulled at the corners of his mouth, twisting it into a grimace. I felt my stomach twist as we locked eyes, and the churning dilemma of emotion surged back. Suddenly a wave of drowning despair. Here was the man who knew every scar on my heart, the one who had held me through my darkest nights. How would he react to this revelation? How would I explain? Dawn's gaze drifted to my mother, narrowing with suspicion, and in that moment, uncertainty wrapped around me again, stifling my breath. Would he be my anchor, or would he be the storm that uprooted my fragile peacemaking? And then, catching my breath, I heard the sharp intonations of a voice behind us. "There she is, the girl with the mother who left." Laughter erupted from the group of teenagers, cruel and piercing, swirling around me like shadows of the past. The resurgence of judgment and the laughter cut deeper than any knife. I was unmoored, treading in tempest waters once again, caught between forgiveness and the bitter gusts of judgment that threatened to drag me under. The day I had anticipated for years was spiraling into chaos, and before I could grapple for grounding, the world around me shifted. There I sat between the edges of a new beginning with my mother and the mocking laughter of strangers, uncertain of what lay ahead, yet I was petrified of what the future would reveal next. The laughter rang in my ears, drowning out the steady pulse of my heart. I felt as if I were encased in glass, watching the world shift and sway while I remained frozen in disbelief. I glanced at my mother, her face pale, eyes wide as the ridicule washed over us like a dark tide. She reached out to grasp my hand, but I flinched, torn between instinct and the need for solace in the storm that I averted my gaze, focusing instead on Dan, who stood on the fringes with arms crossed, his mouth pressed into a thin line. He had always been my safety net. His mere presence brought me comfort, but now his skepticism gripped my heart with a vice-like clarity. I needed his support more than ever, yet the uncertainty in his features, the way they twisted as he calculated the truths of the situation, filled me with dread. "Let's go," I managed to whisper, my voice barely audible against the backdrop of laughter and judgment. But my mother's grip tightened, and I caught a glimpse of her anguish, the reflection of a woman split apart, fighting for acceptance. "Please, let me explain. It's not what you think," she implored, her voice trembling. "Then tell me what it is." I shot back, the embers of frustration igniting within me. "Tell me what's going on and why my life is a spectacle for those people to enjoy." Her face fell, and I could see the battle within her between raw honesty and the instinct to shield my fragile heart from the full impact of her past. "I'm trying. I really am," she said, her voice cracking with the weight of her own failures. "It's just complicated, complicated." That word carried the weight of an entire lifetime, of decisions that had ripped through our lives like wildfire, leaving nothing but ashes in their wake. Meanwhile, the laughter spurred memories of being left alone, avoided at school, whispers ricocheting through the air. How could I ever escape being that child again? Just then, Dan took a step forward, his brows furrowed in concern. "Hey, what are you doing here?" he asked, frustration lacing his words. "You know what this is doing to her." He gestured toward me, but his eyes seemed to burn into my mother, examining the seams of her sincerity. "She came back to explain," I breathed, an unwillingness flickering in my voice, and I hated myself for needing her explanation, so desperately hated myself for not wanting to lash out. "Explain what?" Dawn's voice cut through the noise, sharper than the laughter that haunted the air. "That she left you, that she abandoned you?" The words hung heavily between us, like an unsaid confession. "I don't know," I said, my voice barely rising above the chaos. "I want to hear her out. You shouldn't be alone with her." It was a desperate plea, rising from his concern for me, but echoes of disbelief swirled around us. I felt trapped, the past tumbled and swirled around me, each memory clinging like a ghost afraid to let go. "Just please," I pleaded, wishing for even an ounce of trust, but my words felt impotent. "Let her speak for me," he hesitated, eyes flickering from my mother to me, searching for a reason to understand, but he was fighting against a tide that retained no logic. "You're better than this," he finally said, hands anxiously digging into his own pockets, the edges of his voice trembling in uncertainty. "You don't have to forgive her right now. You don't even have to listen." A part of me nodded, grateful for his instinct to protect, but the other part ached, craved understanding. I didn't want to be thrust back into the darkness alone. I sought a harbor amid the storm, a bridge to a past I couldn't quite reclaim. "Dan, please," I murmured, my voice quaking. "Just give me a chance. For once, let me decide," he sighed, wrestling with understanding and frustration, and I could see the tension etched into his shoulders as he relented. "All right," he said slowly, though his eyes still betrayed doubt. My mother's gaze softened, and she leaned towards me, the hope in her eyes igniting a flicker of warmth in my frozen heart. "I know you're angry," she began, her voice quivering. "You have every right to be, but please listen. The choices I made weren't based on who I wanted to be, but on who I thought I had to be. I never stopped loving you, even when I was too lost to show it, and somehow, despite the chaos surrounding us, I felt a shift deep within. Amid my doubts and fears, a tiny flicker of hope ignited. The layers of time peeled back, revealing echoes of a bond still struggling to bloom. Then, just as I opened my mouth to respond, the laughter grew louder, a group now closing in around us, mocking anew. But the clarity in my mother's eyes remained steadfast, a solid foundation amid tumult. Just then, as I was about to find my voice, a tiny hand reached out from the crowd, holding something glimmering. "Is this yours?" a small child shouted, clutching a silver locket that dangled like a reminder of love lost. The laughter subsided momentarily, curiosity replacing the malice, And in that stillness, something fractured inside me. I reached for it. But the child pulled back, eyes wide as if recognizing the weight of what they were holding. And in that abyss of unexpected kindness, as whispers traveled through the crowd, I felt the sensation of impending revelation brush against my skin, igniting a question I never thought I'd ask. What if the path laid before me was one of healing, even amidst the dark judgment of all that had been? Yet as I stood poised on the precipice of choice, a chill clawed at my spine. A raw, unrelenting fear of losing everything again washed over me. The world tightened, and with that uncertainty, terror gripped my heart. The thought loomed. What if my mother wasn't ready to let the past remain buried, and what tangled fragments of her life would emerge next? The laughter had quieted, replaced by a sharp intake of breath from the onlookers. And as I watched the child clutch the locket, the weight of so much unspoken promise filled the air, a promise that loomed on the edge of a chasm, calling out like a siren, daring me to step into the darkness once more. The air crackled with tension, buzzing like a frayed wire, as I stood frozen, suspended between the flickering light of hope and the oppressive shadows of despair. The child's small hand grasped the locket as if it were an anchor to something profound, waiting for me to make a choice: step forward into the warmth or retreat back into the cold discomfort of my discontent. Please, just give it to me, I urged, my voice sharper than I intended, laced with the desperation that threatened to spill into anger. The crowd held its breath, eyes alight with the thrill of spectacle, all longing to witness what would unfold. It felt as if they were waiting on the edges of some delicate precipice, ready to tip either into judgment or understanding. The child stared at me, wide blue eyes searching for something unseen. Is it really yours? They asked, innocence wrapping around their words like a wistful embrace. With every second of hesitation, I felt the crowd swell. The sound of laughter hung like a dark cloud, waiting to burst. Yes, I breathed, grounding my voice with determination. It belongs to me. Please, can I have it back? The child hesitated, but then nodded, eyes brightening like stars breaking through a stormy sky. As they extended the locket towards me, I stepped forward, heart racing, and took it gently from their palm, feeling the cool metal warmth against my flesh. My fingers explored the delicate curves, and I remembered how my mother used to wear it when I was a child, a simple trinket, yet deeper than the ocean of unspent affection and missed moments anchored within it. Cheers erupted from the crowd, but all I could hear was the hammering of my heart against my ribs as I turned to face my mother. Her expression was a blend of hope and fear, vulnerability stark against the steady backdrop of judgment. It felt surreal to be holding something that once meant so much to both of us in a space teeming with individuals who thrived on our pain. Have you kept this all this time? I asked, my voice trembling. After everything, you still held on to it? I forced myself to look at her, vulnerability mixing with the harsh light of scrutiny surrounding us. The passage of 30 years weighed down on the love we couldn't vocalize, on the truths left unexamined in the chasms between us. That I never stopped thinking of you, she whispered, her voice striving to reach me through the cacophony. I never forgot, not for a moment. It was my reminder, my longing for what I lost. I never wanted to tear us apart, but you did. The words came out sharp, vulnerable to the air, but filled with all the anger I had kept suppressed for years. My mind conjured all the nights I had spent alone, wishing my mother could appear like a ghost to assure me I wasn't abandoned entirely. I know, she replied slowly, wincing as if my words physically hurt her. I know. If I could go back and change it all, then change it, I exclaimed. I stepped closer, desperation creeping into my voice, determined to bridge the chasm that had yawned open between us. Tell me why it happened, why you felt you had to leave. Was it me? Was it something I did wrong? A deep sigh escaped her lips, her gaze unwavering, and for the first time, it seemed as if the weight of our shared anguish pressed down heavy enough for her to feel. It wasn't you, she uttered softly. It never was. I was lost, drowning in my own insecurities. I thought I was protecting you by leaving. Protecting me? My voice broke under the strain of needing to understand. You hurt me. You didn't just leave. You left a gaping hole where love should have been. Just then, an unexpected voice cut through the tension. Dan, who had been quietly observing, stepped forward again, frustration radiating off him like heat. Look, This isn't the time or place for this. You have to at least recognize that this isn't just about you or your feelings. He gestured to the throbbing crowd, drifting closer, fueled by the electric energy of our turmoil. People are watching. Your past doesn't just belong to you. It shaped her. It shaped this moment. His words hung thick in the air, and my heart twisted at the truth revealed. What had been an intimate confrontation had turned into a public spectacle, yet in the folds of my mortality, I saw shards of humanity reflected in strangers' eyes. People were no longer just spectators, but individuals holding a part of our story, longing for something to take away a lesson, a truth, a glimpse of understanding in the face of a fraught history. Somebody should say something. The voice was a stranger, but it rang with conviction, pulling everyone's focus. What do you want to happen? Show us. The invitation felt like an absurd lifeline amid our surreal reality. There was no going back. I stood there holding the locket. It was time to turn the tide. So I took a deep breath. I want to understand, I declared, the crowd leaning in, utterly enthralled. I want to know the truth. Not just for me, but for her too. I need to know what she fought against, what demons chased her away. The silence hung thick, and everyone seemed to be holding their breath as my mother's expression melted into a mask of realization. It was a visceral moment, an intimate fracture forming publicly. It held so much potential for solace or betrayal. But just as my mother opened her mouth, the ground beneath us shifted. A loud crash echoed from the side, followed by a sudden commotion. My heart beat faster as heads turned, whispers igniting panic. Someone had fallen, a ripple of chaos breaking through our fragile moments of connection, fracturing the budding bridge between my mother and me into something precarious. I felt the weight of the locket in my hand, the heartbeat of our past melding into the palpable fear of our shared future, and as my mother's eyes met mine, words unspoken hung heavy in the air. Would we recognize the chance to reach for each other amid the chaos? Would we dare to grasp it before it vanished, leaving us shackled in our separate storms once more? The crowd erupted into a frenzy, shouts of concern and confusion slicing through the moment like jagged glass. I could hardly feel the cold metal of the locket anymore. It felt insignificant in the wake of the urgency that had just unfurled. I turned my gaze away from my mother. Her hopeful eyes now flickered with a hint of fear as I caught sight of what had caused the disturbance. The man lay sprawled on the ground, his face pale and contorted in shock. Someone was kneeling beside him, checking for pulse or breath, a frantic rhythm pounding like a war drum against the backdrop of hushed gasps. This wasn't the reunion I had envisioned. This wasn't the unraveling of our shared pain. This was something altogether different, as if fate itself had interjected, making a mockery of our attempts at healing. Somebody call an ambulance. A woman shouted, her voice piercing through the suffocating tension. The urgency washed over me like a tidal wave of reality, dragging me away from the raw confrontation with my mother. As the crowd swarmed around the man, I felt the heat of rage and helplessness boil within me. I turned back to my mother, who remained rooted in place, eyes darting not just at the commotion, but fixed on the connection which had barely begun to form. The fear I saw reflected back in her gaze unraveled something inside, a deep pang that mingled sorrow and empathy. Please, go check on him, I urged, my voice low but firm. You can help. She hesitated, still caught in the emotional undertow of our previous conversation, but I could see the mother I longed for in her demeanor. He needs you, I pressed, willing her to break free from the moment that had stilled us both. She moved with hesitation. I stepped further into the crowd, my heart racing, compelled by a desire to join the small assembly gathered around the man. Each presence felt charged with an electric longing for hope, a yearning to assist, to bear witness to something larger than our pain. I knelt beside the stranger, my own fear pooling at the back of my throat as the woman beside me gripped his wrist, counting the fleeting seconds of silence that felt eternal. Is he breathing? I asked, my voice trembling, struggling to keep panic at bay. What happened? He collapsed, she replied, summarizing the situation with curt precision as she pressed her fingers to his throat, searching for signs of life. Someone said it might be a heart attack. We need to keep him stable. Instinct kicked in. I squeezed my eyes shut, inhaling deeply. I remembered the first aid courses I'd taken years ago, the cold clinical facts blending into the urgency of today's reality. We should elevate his legs, keep his blood flowing, I said, moving without waiting for permission as I gently placed my hands under his feet, propping them up against the remnants of a vending machine. Time seemed to stretch and bend. Every passing second felt like an eternity. The wail of sirens drew closer, and the panic dissipated slightly as hope flickered amid the chaos. I was in the lines between fear and bravery, caught in the act of caring even as my heart felt equally fractured. And then I felt her presence beside me, a quiet understanding passed between my mother and I in that moment. An acknowledgement we so desperately needed amidst the raw humanity unraveling before us. I caught her eye. Her face was now pale, drenched in empathy as she positioned herself behind me, evaluating the man with the practiced gaze of someone who had held life and death before. "That I know how to help," she murmured, finding her voice amid the noise. It was a whisper, almost like magic, and I felt a swell of emotion at the clarity it gave her. Her hands were suddenly confident, guiding the crowd's energy as she took charge, checking for signs of consciousness, demanding space for the medics who finally arrived. As the paramedics pushed through, I backed away slowly, cautious of the weight of burgeoning hope within my chest. I watched my mother, momentarily transformed amidst the chaos. The woman who had disconnected from me had stepped forward not just as my mother, but as a healer, and perhaps as a person seeking redemption through her own acts of courage. Caught in an emotional crossfire, I realized how intertwined our paths had always been. We had been running parallel, sidestepping the demons of our past. The tension of decades pressed against us, yet in that cacophony of worry, our spirits flickered with a hesitant promise. Just then, in the midst of reviving the stranger, something unexpected happened. A little voice emerged from the periphery of the crowd. It was the child who had handed me the locket, their wide eyes searching and hopeful as they called towards us. "Can you save him? Please?" Those words struck me like a trumpet, resonating deeper than the chaos around us. They were both a challenge and a prayer, reminding me of the childlike innocence nestled somewhere in all of us, yearning for heroes in our moments of despair. "Yes," I said, louder than I had intended, feeling the collective gaze of the crowd. It was a Pelagian echo of resolution, perhaps the first spark of bridging the gap with my mother. My heart raced as I turned toward her, the swell of vulnerability merging into something larger. Would this moment lead us toward reconnection, or was it yet another fleeting allusion to a bond that might never fully be restored? In that charged moment, I caught sight of the man on the ground being lifted onto a stretcher, the paramedics' faces determined as they worked with skill I could only admire. The ground shifted once again, my heart flipping with a sense of dread, but then my mother reached out, her hand grasping mine gently, a lifeline through the turmoil. "Let's not waste this," she said, her voice steadier than I expected, her eyes shimmering with unshed tears. But just as a thread of hope wove between us, I saw it out of the corner of my eye. Something glinted, half buried in the dirt near where the man had collapsed. Instinctively, I moved alongside the paramedics, curiosity igniting a sense of urgency that was deafening. As I drew closer, my breath hitched in my throat. What lay beneath the scattered debris felt impossibly heavy. As I reached down to retrieve it, a wave of recognition swept over me, and with it, a chilling realization, a connection to my past that I hadn't anticipated. It weighed more than the locket in my hand, and threatened to unearth truths I had never dared to explore. The object was an old, tarnished key, one that appeared to have been lost for ages. Its surface was rough, battered by time, yet a familiar shape danced across my mind like a haunting melody. As I turned it over in my palm, the memories rushed back, laced with bittersweet longing. It was the key to my childhood home, the one I had only visited once since we'd parted ways. The key that belonged to a space filled with laughter echoing through the hallways, only to crumble into silence after she left. My mother must have noticed the shift in my expression, for she stepped closer, drawing attention away from the chaos as our shared history enveloped us. "Where did you find that?" she asked, the tremor in her voice betraying the calmness she had displayed moments ago. A fog of confusion and disbelief enveloped me as I clutched the key tightly, worrying it between my fingers. I think it's mine," I whispered, feeling the weight of it hang heavily between us. a silent chasm filled with unspoken words. My father always told me I could come back, but I faltered, unable to let the lingering wounds bleed into every syllable. In that moment, she stepped closer, inviting, yet cautious, and I felt the world around us fade. The screams and sirens dulled to mere echoes, leaving only the softness of her gaze, which begged for an understanding that spanned decades of absence. "You have a right to return," she confirmed, her eyes glistening, "just as I had a right to keep the door open in my heart. Even when I was at my lowest, a wave of vulnerability washed over me." Her words pierced through the guarded barrier I had built, revealing a fragility that resonated between us. Yet, lurking beneath the tenderness was a gnawing uncertainty. Could this be the bridge we needed, or another fraying thread binding us to our painful past? The sirens blared back to life as the paramedics wheeled the man away, plunging us back into the world outside our intimate moment, reminding us how quickly life could change. I glanced at the crowd, gathered closely, their faces etched with a blend of concern and curiosity, silent witnesses to our revelation. Amid the emotional upheaval, I saw the little child still peering through the throng, hope pulsating in their youthful eyes, making a silent plea for resolution. With the key clutched tightly in hand, I took a step forward, glancing between my mother and the retreating stretcher. Every fiber of my being pulled towards the desire to dig deeper, to make sense of these intertwined threads of grief and redemption. "Let's talk," I said with unexpected fervor, the conviction settling heavily on my tongue. "About everything. The past, our hurt. We deserve that." Her expression softened, a hint of pride flitting behind the tears that shimmered in her eyes. And for a fragile moment, I believed that perhaps we could grasp at the frayed edges of our story and weave something new. But just as she opened her mouth to respond, a voice pierced through the crowd, a low, haunting rumble that turned the very air electric with tension. "Don't you dare!" a figure shouted from the outskirts, cutting through our fragile connection, and I turned to see a familiar face emerge from the shadows, my old friend, Damien, who I had thought long gone from my life. His expression was taut with a mixture of anger and something deeper, an urgency that sent a quiver down my spine. "You don't understand what you're stepping into." The sharpness of his words struck me like icy daggers, instantly freezing the warmth that had begun to blossom between my mother and me. The crowd stirred uneasily as I felt the emotional thread between us snapping, the brief glimpse of hope slipping back into uncertainty. "What do you mean? Damien, this is between us," I protested, tension building as I searched his gaze for explanation. He shook his head, his eyes dark with warning. "You think you can just walk back in and expect all your pain to disappear? There are things you don't now, things you've forgotten," he pleaded, desperation lacing his voice. The crowd's energy shifted, and I felt many eyes narrowing, the air crackling with the tension that came from too many lingering emotions colliding. My mother's face paled, and I sensed the dread passing between us, rising up like a wave threatening to drown us both. "I can't let you do this," Damien shouted, stepping forward with an intensity that seemed to ignite the air around us. The crowd, once united in concern, was now a volatile mix of curiosity and mistrust, an audience poised at the precipice of a different kind of revelation. What truths lay buried beneath the surface? His urgency whispered a darker undercurrent, promising that the moment we thought we could share would come crashing down before we even grasped what had begun to form. I turned towards my mother, shaking with uncertainty, the shame of our past pressing down upon us like weighty chains. But just as uncertainty threatened to upend all we had begun to rebuild, Damien pointed an accusatory finger toward the key in my hand. "Put it down. You don't know what that unlocks," he warned, and I felt the final barrier shatter within my heart, the weight of all I had tried to outrun crashing over me. The world closed in, the sirens becoming deafening, the pulse of our shared reality tightening around us until I could hardly breathe. And in that split second before I made a choice, the air pulsed with possibilities, and I stood teetering at the brink of an emotional abyss, hoping to find a path back to healing. Even as shadows of the past loomed eerily close, where the truth of my old life waited to be unearthed, tangled in love, hurt, and fear. What had I really unlocked? And what hidden dangers lurked behind the door of the life I longed to reclaim? The tension was suffocating, The echoes of the sirens intertwined with the chaotic pulse of my heart. I could feel my mother's eyes boring into me, searching for a signal, a reply, anything to hold on to amidst the storm. The murmurs from the crowd became a distant hum as Damien's words hung between us like a guillotine. "Put it down," he implored again, his voice thick with emotion. I glanced at the key in my palm, its cold metal glinting mockingly against the sunlight. What did it truly signify? A promise of possibility or the gateway to long-buried pain? "Damien, please," I pleaded, feeling an unusual surge of anger. "You're acting as if you know everything. This is my life, my choice." Every syllable dripped with urgency as I wrestled with my conviction. But deep inside, doubt crept in. What if I was not ready for what lay behind that door? The seconds stretched like an eternity, and in that pause, I caught sight of the little child again, eyes wide, an innocent observer caught in the throes of adult turmoil. There was something about that persistent gaze full of hope and untainted by the shadows of the past that jolted me. If I could confront my history, if I could turn back and open those long-shuttered windows, perhaps there was a chance for some semblance of peace. But was I prepared for the truths hidden in the corners of my childhood home? And more painfully, could my mother bear them as well? "You think you want to go back," Damien insisted, stepping closer, a mix of desperation and urgency woven into his tone. "But you can't. You have no idea of the darkness woven into that place. You don't remember what happened." I hesitated, my fingers trembling as I fought against the rising tide of memories that threatened to drown me. There were patches of fog in my recollections of that house, the laughter of my father, the warmth of family interspersed with flashes of anger and confusion. What did I refuse to acknowledge? What pain had I tucked away to build my new life? And was I truly ready to unravel it once more? "I'm tired of running," I finally replied, the weight of my decision crashing over me. "Whatever's there, I need to face it. I can't keep looking over my shoulder." Damien's expression faltered, an echo of the past flickering in his eyes, a yearning to reconnect with something lost, but overshadowed by the specter of fear. "You believe confronting the past will heal the wounds? What about the secrets? You can't just walk into that house expecting a fairy tale ending. The truth is twisted, it hurt us. It tore us apart." My mother stepped forward, as if trying to bridge the divide. Her hand reached for mine, but I recoiled slightly, still grappling with the maelstrom of emotions brewing within. "Let's not do this now," she said softly, yet there was a steeliness in her voice. "Not here, not in front of them." But that's when I noticed the rare moment of courage flickering among the onlookers, their faces lighting up with recognition of the vulnerability unspooling before them. Someone in the crowd stepped forward, a middle-aged woman with a gentle smile cradled by deep-set lines of experience. "Maybe she needs to hear this now," she softly urged, her voice slicing through the tension. "Sometimes, we have to tear down the walls to let the healing light in." The woman's unexpected support wrapped around me like a warm embrace. I turned to her, gratitude swelling in my chest. It felt like a rescue, a lifeline tossed amidst the currents of our turbulent sea. But then, as her words reverberated, I felt the weight of my decisions pressing down anew. "Please, tell me what I need to know," I shouted into the chaos surrounding us. The crowd hushed, and for a brief moment, there was stillness. "Whatever it is, I want to hear." Damien opened his mouth, barely able to contain himself as he exchanged anguished glances with my mother. "You really want to unlock that door?" he asked with a shaky breath. "What if it all comes crashing down? What if it changes you forever?" The weight of his warning clung tangible in the air like a thick fog. Yet in that moment of suspense, I sensed my mother's hand brushing against my back, steadying me, and I found courage in the gentle gesture. Maybe she was right. Perhaps there was a chance to confront it all together. "Maybe we step together," I offered, my voice shaking but resolute, my eyes locked on my mother's as if spelling out my unspoken promise. "The past has shaped who we are, but it doesn't mean we can't rewrite our story. It's still ours to change." Just then, the crowd took a collective breath. I felt their anticipation, their hope mingling with despair as we stood on the precipice of revelation. The child watched with unyielding eyes, setting a mirror to the innocent belief that perhaps we could become something stronger, kinder, together. Yet, before I could clasp my mother's hand tightly and feel the strength between us, The sound of a sharp gasp erupted from the back of the crowd. "Wait, you don't know what you're doing," came a voice so familiar it made my heartbeat resonate in my chest, leaving everything else to spiral away. I turned slowly, confusion swirling within me like a tempest. My breath caught in my throat as the realization settled in. A figure emerged from the crowd, their expression torn between panic and urgency. His very presence shattered everything I had dared to hope. "Stop. You can't go back. Because it'll destroy you all over again." The air thickened with dread as I recognized the voice that haunted my waking moments. David, my estranged brother, emerged from the shadows of the crowd like a specter, hope and despair intertwining in his eyes. In that instant, my heart clenched with a dizzying mix of fear and longing. "David?" I breathed, disbelief wrapping around my voice like a shroud. It felt like I was staring into a mirror of another life, long lost yet achingly familiar. There he stood, a poignant reminder of a childhood I thought I had buried beneath layers of grief and denial. "Don't do this," he shouted, a tremor breaking through his facade of bravado. "You think you're ready to face the past? You don't know what waits for you. Let it go, Reina." I felt the air being sucked from my lungs. The facade of strength I had forged for myself cracked under the weight of his words. My gaze darted between David and my mother, whose face was a portrait of shock and sorrow. It was as if I had unintentionally pulled at a thread, unraveling a tapestry woven with years of silence and unresolved pain. "Reina," Damien whispered, stepping forward, a magnetic pull that nudged me toward safety. "You don't have to do this. Let's just go." But his plea felt inadequate against the gravity of the moment. My brother's presence was a thunderous echo of choices unmade and paths not taken. "That I need the truth. I want to understand," I insisted, my voice trembling yet fierce. David's face tightened with anguish as he raised a hand, a silent plea for understanding, a desperate attempt to halt the narrative spinning around us. "You think unlocking that door is going to bring you peace?" he pressed. "You have no idea what you're getting into. The confessions, the secrets, it could destroy everything. You think you'll find closure, but you'll just find more pain. And I can't let you do that." My heart raced, each beat underscored by his words, each syllable layering on the fear I desperately sought to dispel. "Then tell me what happened?" I felt the tears prickling my eyes, raw and unbidden. "Please, don't leave me to wander in the dark. I need to know." That he flinched at my plea, a mix of regret and helplessness shadowing his features. I saw his resolve fracture, yet the vulnerability that followed was like a candle flickering against an encroaching storm. "I can't do it here, with everyone watching." His voice cracked, revealing a chink in his armor. "Then let's go somewhere private," I suggested, urgency pushing me forward. "Where we can talk, just us." He hesitated, glancing at our mother, who stood frozen, anguish radiating from her like the remnants of a nuclear fallout. It's as if I could see the past unfurling before us, the ache and scars that bound us in our shared history. "Are you sure?" David finally asked, uncertainty etched across his brow. The hesitation in his voice ignited an ember of doubt within me, but the desire for answers burned brighter. I nodded, the gesture firm yet frail. The crowd buzzed with whispers, a tapestry of silent judgments punctuating the air as we stepped away from the prying eyes that only added to the weight of our shared pain. I focused on David, on the stirrings of long-buried connections that cut across years of separation. Behind us, I sensed the warmth of solidarity from the middle-aged woman who had become my silent ally, her watchful gaze instilling a sense of warmth as we made our way to a secluded corner away from the crowd. "I hated you for leaving," I admitted, my voice shaking, laced with the remnants of betrayal and abandonment. David's expression shifted, sorrow washing over him like a tide. "I didn't leave you, Reina. I thought I was protecting you. I was just a kid trying to survive, just like you. As we reached a quiet alley, the world around us blurred, drowned out by the pounding of my heart. It was here, in this liminal space, that darkness and light collided, brewing a storm that threatened to test the very fabric of our fractured family. My mother lingered at the edge of the alley, her expression a tapestry of regret and hesitant hope as she remained part of this unfolding drama. Without actively engaging, we had come so far, yet the threads of our history still felt tangled, unyielding. "Before we talk," David started, his voice a trembling whisper. There's something you need to know. Something I didn't want to share, but he paused, swallowing hard. As I caught a glimpse of my mother's anguished eyes behind him, pleading for control, yet yearning for the truth. What is it? I pressed, feeling the tension constrict like a noose around my heart. There was no going back now, not after this emergence of raw, exposed emotions. It's about Mom. There's a reason we left, and just as the truth appeared poised on the brink of revelation, a commotion erupted from behind us. The crowd had surged forward, drawn by something unseen, a sudden interruption of chaos that felt like an ominous herald. In that breathless moment, my heart sank. No, please, I begged, already aware that whatever was about to happen was going to rip open our guarded hearts even wider. I turned just as the first shout reached us, a voice high with dreadful surprise. They found her. They're here. My world spun. Truths that I had sought within myself dimming against the dawn of a new crisis, spiraling out of control before I could grasp the various threads that bound us together and apart once more. The air was thick with the scent of rain-soaked pavement and the metallic tang of fear as I turned to face the crowd, my heart racing with an unsettling mix of dread and confusion. The announcement echoed like a drum roll of calamity in my ears, drowning out everything else. They found her. They're here. For a moment, the world around me seemed to blur, the anticipation curling around my throat like a noose. My mind wrestled with the implications of the shout. Who had they found? The weight of years spent searching for answers pressed against my chest, threatening to crush me with its intensity. Who are they talking about? I whispered, more to myself than to David. But even as the words left my lips, I felt a shift in the atmosphere, an electric pulse that offered an unsettling taste of dread. David's eyes widened in recognition, fear shimmering in their depths. To think it's about Mom. They must be. His sentence hung in the air, suspended by the collective tension rising around us. It felt dangerous, unfathomably fragile. The crackling chaos of the crowd surged forward, a wave of anxious faces and whispers overlapping in a cacophony of uncertainty. Then, as if the universe had decided to reintroduce a ghost into our already turbulent narrative, a figure stepped forward from the throng. I squinted through the commotion, a pulse of hope igniting momentarily. There she was, me mother, stepping through the crowd like a dream revisited, her form both familiar and hauntingly distant. But as she neared, another reality settled upon me. Her face had aged, etched with the sharp lines of worry and sorrow that mapped an unseen journey through painful years. There was a fire in her eyes, tinged with an emotion I struggled to decipher: fear, love, regret. All at once, the tempest inside me surged in ferocity, a headlong rush of conflicting feelings colliding like angry waves. Mom, I gasped, the words slipping from my lips like a prayer. I took a step toward her, but the crowd closed in, transforming the moment I had anticipated for years into one fraught with overwhelming chaos. Reina, she called, her voice cracking against the tumult. I don't. Please don't, I pleaded, a perverse mixture of longing and pain twisting within me. I wanted to reach her, to encase her in the warmth of a long-missed embrace. Yet the shadows of my past clawed at my heart, reminding me of the rift that had grown between us and I in that moment. Everything I had kept suppressed surged to the surface: years of confusion, insurmountable anger, and an aching love that had never truly faded. I glimpsed David's shadow looming behind me, silent yet filled with an urgency that mirrored my own. Our mother's gaze swept over us both, and a flicker of panic crossed her features as she took in the sight of us together. We need to talk, she said sharply, but faltered as a sudden expression of vulnerability crossed her face. It was as if she was standing on the precipice of something that could either destroy or heal. Before I could respond, the crowd surged once more, an eager tide drawn to the tumult of emotions blooming between us. I stepped back instinctively, forcing myself to breathe through the sharp knot in my chest, and oh, I hissed, the sudden tumult of the moment clawing at me. This isn't how it was supposed to be. David reached out, his hand catching mine as the chaos swelled. Reina, listen to her. She's here, and this is our chance for what? I shot back, anger and longing blurring together like paint smeared on a canvas. To rewrite history? To untangle the knots of pain? What if it only brings more hurt? The way David stared at me, eyes wide with fear and determination, drove home the point that there were some truths we weren't ready to face. But the deeper question rolled over me in waves. What consequences would unravel if we delved into the darkness of our collective past? Just as I opened my mouth to respond, another voice ruptured the air, a rough voice that was unmistakable even amidst the chaos. "Raina, David, get away from her." It was Lucas, my childhood friend turned fierce protector, breaking through the crowd like a dam fallen apart. His features were set in a stern warning, even as uncertainty flickered in his eyes. Before I could react, he reached out and pulled me toward him protectively. "You don't know what you're getting into. If she's found her way back, it could be dangerous for all of us." Each word felt like a dagger, reverberating with the weight of a decision I hadn't made, yet was bound to by blood and loyalty. Just as I was about to voice a protest, a siren wailed in the distance, sharp and unsettling, sending a ripple of urgency through the crowd. They were coming for us, bringing with them the burden of the truth and the echo of unresolved ties. And as I looked between Lucas, David, and my mother, realization washed over me. His moment was the tipping point of our fractured lives, teetering on the ledge of revelation. "What do you mean, dangerous?" I whispered, uncertainty clawing at my resolve. But just then, I glimpsed the shadows of figures closing in at the far end of the street. My heart raced as dread filled my mind with frantic images, flashes of confrontations, and heart-wrenching confrontations looming just out of reach. In the heart of that chaos, a bell tolled in the distance, signaling that the continuation of this emotional odyssey was no longer a choice. No one was ready to face what lay ahead. As thunder growled overhead, a chilling thought coiled itself around me. If the truth was far darker than I could ever have imagined? The thunder rumbled ominously as the world around me condensed into a singular moment, me heart racing, my breath catching in my throat. The figures closing in, wielding unknowable truths, masked intentions. I could feel the energy of the crowd shift from curiosity to apprehension, the tension pulling tighter like a noose around my heart. "Raina." My mother's voice reached out through the chaos, breaking the shell I had started to build around myself. "You have to trust me. Please, trust." "After all this time?" I shot back, the words escaping as if they were bound to razor's edges. "How can I trust anything when I don't see you standing here for redemption? I see you as a reminder of abandonment, of dreams dashed and hopes lost." With that, the weight of my pain and anger bore down on her, illuminating the shadows flickering behind her eyes. "You have no idea how I've suffered, how the weight of my choices has haunted me. I didn't just abandon you. I thought it was for the best. That left me alone." I shouted back, desperation mingling with resentment. The words hung heavy in the air, pierced by the lingering murmurs of the crowd. The anticipation, the fear, the judgment they bore. It felt explosive, like an ignited powder keg. I was tired of replaying the past. I wanted peace, but it seemed relentless in its pursuit. "Raina," she continued, determination cleaving through her vulnerability. "When I left, it wasn't just to leave you behind. I left in search of demons that plagued me harder than anything I could put on you. And now they've returned." Her confession echoed deeper than the cacophony surrounding us, threading through my heart like an echo of understanding mingled with the roots of fear. "If they've found me, they'll uncover everything." The truth rattled in my chest, a primal fear that whatever shadows dwelled in the past would rear their heads again, tearing apart everything I had struggled to reconstruct. "But what's the danger?" David asked, breaking the unsteady silence that had fallen. He leaned closer to me, urgency radiating from him. "What are we facing?" Suddenly, the shadows at the edges came into focus, figures emerging from the depths of darkness. I could see them now, strangers, yet painfully familiar. Faces that felt known but carried an echo of betrayal. My world trembled beneath me as I recognized one, a memory surfacing like a tide pink with regret. "Mom, is that them?" David's voice faltered momentarily as the air buzzed with the tension of old sins returning to haunt us. A step closer brought clarity, and I could see eyes staring back at me, yes, that bore witness to our fractured lives. The whispered conspiracies about our past floated through the air, charged with bitterness. We were all a part of the past, but trapped in our present, unable to evolve beneath the weight of judgment. Before I could process who stood before me, their faces morphed into something darker, a collective threat melding around my mother like a storm, pulling at the strings of a life I had slowly started to piece together. "Leave her alone," I shouted, taking a step forward. The protective instinct coiled tightly in my chest as I felt the warmth of loyalty surround Meth's unyielding embrace of those who stood behind me. The leader of the group stepped forward, a woman whose presence resonated with authority. "You think you've come to close the door on the past?" she sneered, voice dripping with contempt. "You think she can just walk away from what she started? It doesn't work that way." The crowd moved closer, anticipation mingling thickly with the narrative she spun. I felt the icy fingers of dread graze my spine. A profound yearning to seek refuge rushed through me as I searched our faces for friendship amidst the shadows. "Enough!" my mother cried, her voice sudden and unapologetic like thunder on a clear day. "This is not how it ends. I will not have you rewrite my history." All this time, I carried the burden. But amidst every journey, I found the pieces of who I am today. Her raw conviction rang like a clarion call, shattering some of the anger and resentment that dictated our past. As if the air shimmered, a wave of understanding washed over all of us. Greed, envy, bitterness replaced with profound vulnerability. For a moment, it felt as if we stood on renewed ground, eager yet frightened, ready to face what the universe had to reveal. "Mom," I pleaded, the falter in my own anger swirling into something softer. "Is this our moment? Can we face this together?" I stepped forward, my heart pounding through the chaos, urging her to recognize the connection resurfacing in the waves of hostility. But just as hope drifted forward like a fragile butterfly, another figure stepped forward, my father, his features worn, yet the love and fear etched in the snow of his eyes mirrored my own. "What are you doing here?" I screamed, unable to digest that he had entered from the shadows of our broken family picture, a fracture now wide open. "That I can't let this happen," he cried out, urgency pulsing in his voice, each word laced with regret. "We need to leave, Reina. Trust me." "Why, Dad? Why should I trust you now?" The resentments bubbled back to the surface, boiling thick as blood. "You, who were once my anchor and now just as lost." "Because your mother is right," he replied, the weight of years in the tremor of his voice. "We tore ourselves apart, wanting to protect you from things we never had the strength to face. But you deserve the truth. Together, we must face it or remain prisoners of it. You have to understand our world, the forces at play that demanded sacrifice." The crowded chaos thickened, wrapping me in a tempest of vulnerability and confusion. "Why now? Why this moment?" I trembled as I felt the air grow heavier with secrets yet unspoken. "Because sometimes," my father whispered, voice cracking under the weight of his own hardships, "the very things we run from are the ones calling us home." In that moment, clarity erupted like the dawn, illuminating the shadows stretching across my heart. Standing there, entwined within a storm of feelings, realized it wasn't just about forgiveness, it was about the acceptance of our reality. Like a kaleidoscope, we'd spin in circles, holding the fractured pieces that could still form something beautiful, something honest. Trembling, I turned back to my mother, finding the raw intensity of her gaze anchored in my own, as if we were not just a mother and daughter, but two souls wandering through a labyrinth of loss and regret. "Are you ready to face it with me?" I whispered, seeking the strength I was so ready to give. She nodded, eyes glimmering like a beacon of hope. Together, we stood on the edge, the storm of our lives swirling around us, knowing that regardless of what lay ahead, we wouldn't face it alone. Perhaps pain and truth could intertwine, forming a bridge we had so desperately searched for. As the figures in the crowd shifted, the tension unfolded like a delicate fabric unraveling, and I whispered the words that would set us free. "Let's confront this together. It's time." In that resolute breath of acceptance, the air hummed around us, an unyielding promise that while memories would remain, they would no longer dictate our futures. And with that promise, a new beginning unfurled, preparing us for the journey toward healing. The crowd fell silent, their eyes fixed upon us as we took the first step forward in a path veiled in uncertainty but filled with the glimmer of hope. And in that designated silence, I realized that sometimes, amidst the turbulent tides of an emotional storm, It is in the embrace of vulnerability where we find redemption. And from the depths of my heart, I knew, whatever lay ahead, we would face it not just as a mother and daughter, but as two souls finally ready to meet the ghosts of our past together. As the storm darkened and the first drops of rain fell lightly against the ground, I felt a promise of renewal. Maybe, just maybe, we would emerge transformed. And in that moment, I understood, amid the tumultuous waves of our past, if I could hold on to that glimmer of hope, I would never be alone again.